Welcome, everyone, to the first Expat Hoops Forum. I'm Tony Budney, along with my co-host, Andy Huberman. We invited back several of our previous guests to talk about subjects related to why certain players don't just go pro instead of, say, heading to another college at this point, and how they would think they would navigate the global pandemic sports environment if each of them were individually just starting out. We have with us previous guests Torey Thomas, Kirby Burkholder, and Shane Lawal to talk it over. Let's get started.
Well, first of all, thank you all for joining us. We've kind of talked a little bit off the pod about this topic. And so one of the things that has kind of been a common question from some people is why don't, player X, Y, or Z go pro? Why are they taking the extra COVID year? Sometimes COVID year or two at this point. So pretty much going to open it back up to you. Kirby, why don't you start us off and say, what do you think you would do in this particular situation? If you haven't seen her full interview, first of all, you really should. She had a really great career at James Madison, was not drafted, but invited to the Mystics training camp and started off at a really good league. But if you were basically at James Madison, what do you think you would do? Do you think you would take another year elsewhere once you graduated? What do you think you would do?
Especially this COVID time, just coming out of COVID time, I'm definitely going to take my extra year at JMU, opportunity to get, furthering your education, getting a master's, kind of prolonging. Now in college, you wouldn't exactly know what you're going to be going into overseas, but just with the COVID year, overseas is already kind of tough and a big mindset, lifestyle shift. So then on top of COVID, it was a tough year for 100% of the people that I talk to and know overseas and me personally, and just very not ideal to be over there this past season. So if I could know any of that, or if I had the opportunity just to be continuing one more year at my university, I would definitely choose that route.
So it sounds like not only both in terms of the way that you think you would have done it as a college senior, but also with the benefit of having several years now as a pro, you would come to the same conclusion of saying, I'm staying here.
Yeah, especially like my personal situation. Now, again, everyone's situation, if you're going to be going like top draft pick or a top league overseas, it could be, maybe a different situation. But still, just overall, I think taking that year for most people would be a good idea, especially with these times with COVID. And I mean, it was a whole addition to the overseas factors. So.
And actually, you're somebody that had an injury as well after college.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I guess there's probably not as many people, fortunately, that are probably in that scenario. But I remember back when we did your interview, you were saying that, the time to get injured, if you were going to kind of control it, was going to be in college versus pro. So, I mean, that's probably another factor for some people.
Yeah. So if you're like coming off of an injury or anything like that, it's just in college, everything's kind of just laid out for you. It's handled for you. Like if you got injured, either your athletic trainer or the doctor, or if you needed surgery, like you're just told what to do. You go do it. You're guided through every single step. And yeah, if you're getting injured overseas, it's a little bit of a different process. And again, it's situational to the teams and the staff and where you're at, but it's a lot tougher and it's more like on your own type of thing, even if the team is covering certain things. And you're away from home. So yeah, just as far as the injury aspect, college just kind of hands you everything, deals with everything, leads you through everything. And it can't get much better than that anywhere you go.
And I mean, just to continue on what exactly everything means, not only in terms of medical care, but you're also talking about, yes, you may be provided housing in your new place, but it may not be that great, versus here is usually dorms are going to be pretty good.
Yeah, dorms are off campus.
I mean, we're starting
like you said, like the food, you're either getting the food on campus or you're provided money for food. It's kind of just how everything is just super handled for you, and you do your schedule based on like everyone telling you or your treatment, and it's kind of like you don't have to be like fully grown up yet in college, and you're just led through everything. You're given a lot of people get way more nice things, especially on the girls' side. Like, I'm sure if you're in a top league on a very big money league, you'll get a lot more things. But like, you're gonna go from getting 8 pairs of shoes in a college season, and then you go pro and you got to buy your own shoes. Like, I only had one pro team that provided shoes, so that's probably different with girls and guys and a lot of different levels of leagues, but just stuff like that is what you're not going to get always going pro overseas.
And I actually had a question related to that, and I was writing down some thoughts before we came on here. I was watching the talent level. Of course, she's the one of the better players in the country at Paige Becker's during the course of the season. And I had this conversation with some other people about one and done women's professional basketball players who are that type of talent, who there's this discussion about Brianna Stewart when she was at UConn. There was talk of her leaving a year early as her junior year. She ultimately didn't. I don't know, that was probably a good decision at the time. What do you think it would take to get a player like that would leave college early for the pros? What type of conditions have to exist in women's basketball for that to be a possibility for a player to actually consider leaving school early to go pro somewhere?
I mean, it's usually about money. So I think, if you know that, I think if you're that top level and you're going to be able to go pro and make an impact, and be able to be secured on a team, and the opportunity for a lot of money is there, then I think women should have the opportunity to do that. I don't think it would be as common. And I also think getting your 4-year education is a good option. But I don't know what it takes besides just opportunity and money to have someone, that's usually why I would say most males would do it. Most people are looking at the opportunity and the money and what can come from it versus like not continuing your education.
I actually have a question that I would open up to everybody. So I think that was one of the things that we were talking about off the pod. You and I have had a pretty detailed discussion about this, about whether or not to turn pro. Kirby gave her 2 cents. What do you think that you would do in the same situation? As if I don't know, but tell everybody else.
I agree with Kirby so much on pretty much everything she said, as far as, when you're in college, you're getting treated like a kid, not in a bad way, but everything is planned out for you. One of the most underrated things that you get in college is people tell you when to do something, how to do something. And, in college, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, what do? They run you, they bench you, you get yelled at, maybe you get cussed out. In the pros, you don't do what you're supposed to do, you get cut, you get sent home, you get fined. That's adult punishment, you get fired. And I think that's something that she also made a point, is that, we say what we would do in hindsight, but I think 22-year-old me probably would have got antsy and probably would have went overseas thinking that's the right decision to make. In hindsight, it's an easy decision to make. But at that point, when you're, a lot of us, can't speak for everybody, a lot of people, they're ready, unless they're 1 out of 5 athlete is in love with the school they're at. They're in love with the coach. They're in love with the minutes they play. They're in love with everything that's happening. It's a lot of athletes that are not satisfied, and they might say, you know what, I need to get a change of scenery. Coach is hating on me or whatever. And you might see a lot of kids that get antsy feet. But even in that situation, I think what's happening a lot right now in college days is that kids transfer for their grad year. So even that is even a better option than going overseas. Like, okay, well, if I'm sick of it here, I've graduated. Well, I'm gonna go to this school and do my grad year. And what a lot of high major schools want is mid-major vets. So it's a great market for a kid to, like we said, pack up in one school and go pack up one school and go to Kentucky. So I don't know, it's a tough one, man. 90%, 95% of people that go overseas don't make good money at the start. That's something they don't tell you until you start looking into that. And so if you're not going to make high 5 figures as a rookie, if you're gonna make low to medium 5 figures, man, you're better off getting a scholarship and some pocket money. And then I don't know everybody's age on here. I'm 34, so I graduated '09. Back then, they didn't give you the type of pocket change they give you now, in college. So if they was giving me what they give kids now back then, I'm definitely in no rush because I'm not paying for anything, and then I'm getting some pocket money. I'm just, I'm gonna stay here and I'm gonna figure myself out, But I think when you're younger, time moves differently, so you don't think you have as much time as you actually have. Can you guys hear that screaming?
Yes.
It's fine. It adds the tawa of the chat, if you will.
I'm gonna go back on mute now.
That's okay.
And I think one more point that I just thought of is like some people, I've heard the argument of, if you take an extra year in college, you're giving yourself another year to possibly get an injury. We talked about injuries a little. So it's like, if you did get injured in that 5th year, it could hurt your first pro step. So that could be another reason people might want to just be like, I'm ready to go. I don't want to take the risk of an injury and lowering my, pro ranking or how you're going to translate into the pros.
That's interesting because you take a different tack than I usually hear about going pro, which is the fear of getting injured when you're not making money, hurting your ability to make money later on down the road. You're saying that, the fear of getting injured when you're a pro, if you come out too early, is also a factor too.
No, I was saying if you were taking, like I've heard that, from some people, like I'll go pro because if they took an extra year in college and got injured, then yeah, that would either delay going pro or just kind of lower because when you get injured, even when I got injured being a pro, when you do come back, they treat you like you're just went down 4 levels. They take down your money, even if you're already playing at a high Euro Cup level. I mean, my next season, it was hard to come back and prove. You have to they make you prove yourself all over again.
Okay. Yeah. So you and I had the same thought then, because I've heard that before. I do wonder. I mean, with the way COVID affects people's bodies, I know that a lot of people have had long COVID issues too. It's fortunate that we haven't had anybody in this chat that has had that issue. But I wonder too if there are people that have that in the calculation. They hear people with these chronic lung and heart conditions that basically, if they were to go pro afterwards, they wouldn't quite be the athlete that they were before they got COVID, if that was the case. I do wonder if there's anybody out there where that's a calculation too. I think that's a bit of a gamble.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a gamble because like I know a couple people that got it while they were in Italy and it was a little struggle for them to come back. But there's one WNBA girl that's like going on 2 years, or she got it back in the beginning of COVID and like she still hasn't been able to return. And I think the average person comes back okay, but there are those like situations where yeah, it could be just varying on that too.
Yeah, I worry about that sometimes with a lot of players, especially if they're coming back. Now, before we came in a chat, we were talking about Justin Kier, who's a former Mason player. He's transferring again. He transferred once already. And he was a guy who played at Georgia after playing a few years at Mason. He has another year of eligibility that he's trying to get in because of this COVID year, because everybody got another year of eligibility, which is part of the impetus for this forum in the first place, is that people have a unique situation where they're a bit older and they have a bit more time in college than they would otherwise. And he's choosing to take another year of eligibility, choosing between some schools that Georgia, I would say, was a step up for Mason. Some of the schools on his list are sort of a lateral move. Maybe he's trying to get more playing time, but I guess the impetus of what's going through his head right now, where he is going for another year instead of going pro. I guess he's sort of a test case.
So again, he doesn't have what me, Kirby, and Torey have. He doesn't have hindsight, or he doesn't have the presence to know that he's not the perfect fit. No disrespect to that kid, but he might not be the right kid for it, because if you are a 2-time transfer, Europe is going to be tough on you, because normally what that says to me is that you don't know how to, let me choose my words carefully. you have deal breakers. Like there's certain things you won't fight through, which is cool. Everybody has their number. Like everybody will tell you, well, I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to deal with that. But it also means whether these kids want to admit it or not, you don't handle all adversity with them. Europe is going to give you every bit of adversity that you're asking. It's going to give it to you. So you're better off going to another school. Don't go to Europe because you're mentally not ready for Europe. Your coach, 4 out of 5 times is going to yell at you. There's a 30 to 40% chance your coach is going to be from the Yugoslav region, Croatian, Serbian, something like that, and it's going to be a tough adjustment for you. You're going to have fans that's going to hate you every bad game you have. You're going to have to learn how to make a meal. You know, you're going to come back from that tour day at 9:30 p.m. and you got to cook for yourself and you're exhausted. And let's not forget, your family is only 3 p.m. for everybody else in the States. So they're not really ready to talk to you and be your therapy. And eventually they'll stop being as responsive as they used to be because, you know, out of sight, out of mind. So, I mean, kids like that are the same ones that their parents are always got to be there for them. They need that support system. You don't have a support system in Europe, in South America, in Asia. You don't have a family support system. So it's better for you to enjoy that last bit of your childhood as long as you can. Because to me, you're still a child until you graduate college. Because again, it's not an insult, it's because of all the structures that come with it. So I mean, I wouldn't think that his best move should not be to go overseas. He needs another year of college. He needs to prolong it as long as possible.
Now I see Torey's back on board with us for a minute. I actually wanted to ask you a specific question too, because you're now a team owner with some fringe type, guys who are trying to make that leap into the pros. It's a little bit different for them, who are maybe looking for an opportunity, which is interesting to me. What's it like having and knowing guys that are looking for that in this environment when they're not the creme de la creme? They might have even been fringe type college players that, didn't quite have the skills and the talent to go pro at first, but they're looking for something to get themselves a reel with what you're going through with your league.
Yeah, so I would say it's a great experience because we forget, and just because you graduate college, then what about them years of trying to find yourself? It's not like you graduate college and everything just hands out. You go find a job, whether it's job in the professional world or a job playing professional sports. It doesn't just happen for everybody like that. So now we're seeing this trying to fill a gap, a void of being able to give them an opportunity. So people think the minor league in America is the G League. Well, there's NBA players trying to get into the G League. So how is anybody else going to try to get it in the G League that has no real resume? So it's still like fighting something that American basketball minor league doesn't have. So this league, Pro Basketball Association, was trying to help guys be able to get that first, like Shane was saying, like maybe the third division in Spain, third division in France. Don't you still can make a few dollars and start your career if you're humble, understand what comes with it. Like you can really do it if they give you a chance, right? If they give you a chance. So this is supposed to be giving somebody a chance because the minor leagues are the hardest leagues to play in, right? Because you're not going to get any money. You're going to have the grind. It's similar to the grind of a Europe, but in Europe, you can start making some money. But that's if you play in second division and better to be able to say, well, I'm going to try to make a career out of this. You start one level and you can keep working your way up. But you got to start with humble beginnings. And that's what this Pro Basketball Association is doing. It's a humble beginning that gives you exposure, stats, video, and access to be able to say, I have a resume.
And the interesting part of that, I guess the most interesting part of all of it is that when you're a team owner, like, what do you tell people about this COVID situation? Like, I know they're starting in your league, but eventually they want to make the leap somewhere. And
yes.
I mean, it's really not looking like things outside of the US are going to be stable. It'll be more stable than last year, right? but it's not
Right.
going to be quite as stable as it could be in the previous years. So what's the mindset that you would tell them to be in right
The
now?
mindset I say is just you just graduated college, you don't have anything. You can't go do an extra year like they're saying. So they're saying turn pro. You don't have video, you don't have so last year's year is wiped out. If you send a film to the GM and it's from 2019, 2020 season, they're gonna say what happened this year. Even with COVID, they're gonna still act like they don't know what's happening. So we need film from this year. So what we do is tell them they're still staying up to date with regular basketball, not street ball, not park basketball, but real refs under the whistle, 40-minute game. We're selling them on the identity to have a resume. So when I ask a player who asked me before I started, this team, well, can you help me get overseas? Okay, what is your resume? Where did you go to college? What did you do in college? Do you have game film? Most of the time, that's no, really no. They might have played in college. They can't even get the game film from their coaches and staff. So they're out the way because nobody wants to see just you playing, basketball from 3 years ago. They want to see up-to-date film, and that's what we're providing.
Kirby, I wanted to ask you, as we're in the midst of this discussion about like fringe professional talents, from your perspective, playing in college and women's leagues, what would you say to someone who was kind of a fringe candidate right now? I mean, we've been talking about the people, hey, these are the people that are thinking about, going pro or leaving early or something like that, taking another year of eligibility. But what about the people that even if they take another year of eligibility, they're still going to kind of be on the fringe if they end up leaving for school and things are unstable?
I think if you don't have an opportunity of going overseas or G League or pro like here in the States, then that's a wonderful idea because like Torey was saying, if you're out a year, even if it's with an injury or even with the COVID year, teams are 100% questioning your skill, your ability. So if you prove yourself for years and years and then you get injured, unless you're like very, very top notch or whatever the case is. So it's like, even if you're coming out of college, you can't go pro this year with COVID, and there's the opportunity to be on one of those teams, that I would do it 100%. It's cool that you have a team that you're doing that for women. I know, especially it's rare. That's one thing that's like, there's not even a G League. So there's like just so few opportunities for women. There are a few like little pro or semi-pro like women's teams scattered kind of. I know I was asked to come to like St. Louis and play on one this summer. They kind of do like a summer league and you can get a little bit of money, but yeah, for men especially, because you just don't want to have that limbo time where you're not playing and have no film. A team is definitely gonna be like, well, what were you doing during that time? Why weren't you playing? You have no stats, what were you doing? Like they're gonna go with someone who was playing 100%.
Yeah, and that's kind of what a common thread that we've had in some of these chats that we've had is that this is a job ultimately for a lot of people, especially if you're not one of the top-notch players playing for the top-notch teams. You're going to be grinding out there to some extent, even if you're making money. And that would be the same thing that someone that is going for a 9-to-5 job. Hey, there's a gap in your resume. Like, what's the deal? You got to explain that to a potential employer, so to speak, which it's always interesting to see the parallels between like how playing pro sports below a certain level bears some similarities to people that in quote unquote normal white collar, even blue collar jobs would have to go through as well.
They speak about experience, right? So they say, so what is your experience? But how can you get experience if nobody gives you a chance to get in? And that's what we're trying to do. They can't get experience without a chance. So this league could do that. And like Kirby said, the women's side.
That's the biggest way. That's the biggest way they play the game is that experience crap.
Yes.
Dog, like it's like they say, oh, he needs experience for us. Okay, how do I get experience if I can't play?
Can't play.
Where do I get the experience from? Where do I pull it out the thin air?
Yeah.
And to kind of go back to what Kurt, man, I think it's not fair what happens with women's basketball, mainly because one, the WNBA doesn't have enough basketball teams. Mm-hmm. So you got to think about this. Like there are 12 basketball teams in the WNBA, but there's the same number of collegiate athletes men's and women's side. It might even be more women's because I believe because of Title IX, I think colleges get one extra scholarship. Maybe
actually two, I think.
Two extra scholarships. So we have more.
It's only 12 WNBA teams? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
because
with
of
12 person
because of
roster.
football. Mostly because of football, like it has to even it out.
Okay.
I don't know the exact English. I just think that there are more scholarship athletes in women's basketball than men's basketball. So you already have more talent on the D1. Let's just talk D1 on the D1 college level in the women's side. They have a 3-round draft for 12 teams. So 36 players get chosen. And it's 12 teams with 12 roster spots?
12
So
roster.
It's
And
100.
sometimes they don't even carry, they'll carry maybe 11 sometimes.
Right. So it's 144. It's 144 professional women's basketball in the WNBA. Basketball players in the WNBA. Where does everybody else go?
Yeah. And then
actually,
not even a G League, and
No
then
G League. There's no
less
other
opportunity, I would say, overseas. I mean, because even overseas, I don't know if you ever see women's teams playing. Usually the max is 2, depending which country.
Yep.
There's, the occasional dual passports, but men, I'm like, oh, you guys got 5 American starters. You got like 6 Americans on your team. So like, it's even less opportunity for women overseas as well.
Yeah,
and actually, that's what I was going to hit at. Actually, at some point, I wrote it down. It's a numbers game, even for overseas. Like, we've talked about it. Depending on what league you're in, whether it's men's or women's. I think we talked to Gabe last, and talking about you could only have like a number of Americans on the floor at a certain period of time. Some of them allow you like 5 or something like that, but there are other leagues that are lower that they only allow you a couple. So not only are you going after less spots, but also, I mean, you may not even know that many other Americans on your team if you're going over there as a professional just starting out, right?
Yeah. So when I first started, it was just one other American. I was on a team, my Belgian team. I was the only American. Now there's other foreigners because of the other Europeans that come in. And then there's like occasionally ways that you can get others if American has a dual passport and stuff. But yeah, it's just so much more limited. And then depending on the league, like sometimes the lower teams in the leagues don't even bring in, or they might bring in less Americans. So it's just like way less women's Americans than you'll see on the men's side. It'll be way more men's players over there.
This is quite fascinating. I did have one question I wanted to open to the floor, and it's sort of related to this, but it's not necessarily related to players going pro or not in a time of COVID. I wanted to ask you all, how has this experience with COVID changed your perspective, if it has, on playing professional basketball, period? As people that have had higher levels of uncertainty in certain situations, going home early, we've had other people on the podcast that have had difficulty getting money here and there because they had to travel around, and travel was so much more difficult. So how did that individually change your perspective? Kirby, since we left off with you last, to start with you first.
I can only just speak from my personal like COVID year experience. And I think there's other things that play into it, because it was like a second kind of knee injury, a minor one, but just on top of my other ones. And like, but it kind of took my motivation and enjoyment down a few levels, because this past year was just so tough overseas for me. And like, I know there was like extra issues with my team on top of just the COVID year in general, but I'm also like reaching my semi older years, I guess. So kind of just I think it just played into me questioning more how much I want to be overseas, and just during these kind of tougher times. So I would say it just played in negatively to my overall enjoyment and joy of playing, and just making overseas a little tougher than it already was, which does make me question like how much I want to continue it.
Torey, how do you feel?
Yeah, she's hitting it right on the head with that. I went back after the COVID, so I had a chance to play again, and it got shut down in France because of the COVID, as far as like playoffs. They just want you to play straight through. So when you're a competitor, you want to play for something. You don't want to play just the regular season and whoever's win, because things change in the playoffs if you've been playing playoffs all your career. So being shut down, we had a 6 o'clock curfew in France. That makes you think like, and you got no family. Of course, you don't have no real friends because you're only over there for a certain amount of time. So it does make you really, it tests everything that's been tested is even more right now, which in life, everybody's been tested with COVID, but being away from people that you could count on is what makes it even worse, I think. Still fortunate to be able to play and play basketball for a living is a great thing. So I don't want to like complain about it. I want to be grateful for it. And I'm happy I'm still able to at 36 and playing this 14 years. So I don't want to say too many things that's like, but it is challenging.
And Shane, I know your perspective is a little bit different because you had already kind of settled into a new life outside of professional basketball, but you definitely did have your high school girls team delayed for a bit. And since we were talking about pro aspirations, I'm wondering in this COVID period, what you told them about the pro experience as it relates to this COVID situation as well.
They didn't care. They didn't listen. But,
Teenagers,
teenage girls, man. They half of what I said. They said that's just Coach Shane. He's just talking. But I would say that I think the main thing for me from the player standpoint was the one ray of sunlight and just the cloudiness of my last however many years of how my career ended was that if anything, I retired at the right time. I can only imagine trying to play 1 or 2 more years dealing with all the crap that a lot of people are having to deal with, and it's unfair. With that said, from the girls' perspective, man, I just athletics in general, it's really weird right now with COVID, man. There's so many. It's not even about the sport anymore. It's about the guidelines and the precautions and all the different things that people are doing to show face to regular athletics, and just if you lack resources, just like we're talking about, comparing men's to women's, or comparing, the people that don't have to, the people that can go right away to a good situation, the people that aren't in the same boat to just go straight to Europe. In that same token, in the high school level, it's resources versus it's the haves versus have-nots. The people who really excelled over pandemic were the people who had access to gyms, or had access to nice outdoor courts and, that can afford gym rentals when there was only 2 gyms available in the whole state, So it was a have situation for us because we were the have-nots, you know what I'm saying? And we kind of had to put together as much as possible to even make it to the state championship, only to lose. But it's definitely one thing I learned with the pandemic is if you're not in a good situation before, you are going to be in a worse situation after. If you were in a great situation before, you were going to be in a great situation after. So it's unfair to the people who deserve it. I literally sometimes I pray for people that my friends that play overseas, because I know it's a rough time to be overseas. For some of them, for instance, Michael Eric is one of my best friends. He's at Cheska. He lost his father in the pandemic. He lost his father recently, but at the same time, outside of the family tragedy, man, his basketball career didn't even take a hiccup. So it's just all about situation. It's a have and a have nots. If you're playing for Cheska, pandemic is not going to be an issue. You know what I'm saying? If you're playing for Cheska, if you're playing for Barcelona, pandemic, Alex Sabrina is my old teammate. They're not having no issues over there. They paying them on time. Every time they pay them early when it's because they don't pay on the weekends in Barcelona. So funniest thing about Barcelona, if the first of the month fell on the weekends, you got paid at the end of the month that came before. So it was the first place ever in my career that I got paid. You know what I mean?
Wow, that is weird.
Place ever in my career that I got paid early, to the point where we used to joke about it. Like we used to joke if our money didn't hit our accounts by 6 a.m., we'd be like, "Hey man, we're going to the owner." Because everywhere else I went, we're 2 months late, we're 3 months late, we're 4 months late. So if you're at Barcelona, if you're at Madrid, and there's certain teams. Kirby, what is that? What is that really, really good EuroLeague team in Spain? For women's side, it's a couple.
Valencia.
I can't remember. What you said? What would you say?
Isn't it Valencia?
Valencia is one of them. It's one that's got they got a weird name. It might start with an E or something. But places like those, they're not hurting. They're going to be fine. You know what I'm saying? They're going to be fine. But
are you talking about Ekaterinburg?
Hmm?
Are you talking about UMMC Ekaterinburg? They're the three-time.
That's Russia.
Yeah. That's the EuroLeague. Yeah.
Yeah, they're 100% not worried about that stuff. I'm sure.
Yeah.
I know you said it started with an E, so I thought I'd look that up and see if I could.
I'm gonna find it because it's bothering me now.
Yeah, there you go. It's
certain places they're not. It's just all situation, man. And I wish that, it's sad because you have to just work your way to be on the right side of the situation, So.
And I know, Kirby, Fallon, she's the one that actually got you on this podcast. But I remember her saying that access to gyms in the Icelandic league was a bit of a difficulty for her. Like you're some of these lower leagues, you're playing in gymnasiums, high school gymnasiums, lower level gymnasiums, and things like that. And you might not even have had access to a gym during COVID, which is what Shane was speaking to in terms of access to facilities really dictating what your individual experience was during the pandemic, for sure.
Yeah,
definitely. I know Poland was like shut down as a country, but like as far as sports, they were always still allowed to use the gyms and stuff. Like, I guess it just kind of depended. But like Shane was saying, even at home, like when COVID first hit in my like hometown area, I remember like, because it was just so hard to find a gym, and like the one private gym that was open was just booming because that was the only place. Was like schools. Most places are run through like schools and stuff. So if the schools were shut down, and it was like if you had a gym to go to, it was kind of like elite because so many people did not have access. Whether they were pro. I mean, my friends out in LA, that was like a tough place for like people to find gyms and stuff. So. It just kind of depends where you're at with the situation, but definitely, like Shane said, it's just kind of like if you happen to have a situation like that, you were lucky, and a lot of people didn't. So
I actually talked about this with Porter a little bit off the pod because he's still in Europe, and so one of the things that this goes into NCAA issues with you're not necessarily allowed to talk to agents anyway. But one of the things I kind of brought up with him was that. If you're going to give this extra year of eligibility and everything like that, and people are going to take advantage of it, it's going to kind of create a backlog. So there's, high school kids that are probably not going to be able to get to Division I. Like if they were a Division I target, normally they might be filtered down. And so I think that's something, first of all, that doesn't get talked a lot about. But the other thing is I think that if you're somebody that's on the fence, like if you're one of these graduating seniors or you're going to be a grad student or a grad transfer or something like that, one of the things that might have helped, at least the two of us talked about, was being able to have like some sort of, one-time access to an agent, or to waive that sort of requirement, or even to have something where it's like regulated. I mean, do you think that would have been something that would have been immensely helpful to you if you could have had that decision? Because obviously, yes, we know that there's different levels of agents. There might be some that aren't as good and that, you've had to move on. But hypothetically, if there were some agents that you had, if you were a grad transfer thinking, am I going to go to another school, or am I going to try to go professional? Really?
Yeah, because again, you actually made your own counterpoint right not that long ago. You said, there's so many types of agents out there. If you're a good agent, you're only going to go after good players coming out of college. So those kids that are the ones that are trying to figure out, is it worth it for them to go to this level or that level, the agents that they're going to attract are the agents that just took the test last week and they call themselves a FIBA certified agent, but that doesn't mean anything, and they don't know what they're doing. They don't have any relationships, and they're gonna, the ones that are gonna waste your time anyway. So I don't really think it's a good idea to open something like that up because it'll be too watered down. It'll just be it'll be even more, it'll be messier. Speaking on what you said though, I'm somebody that it directly affects because, I think you follow my team enough to know, I have 4 D1 kids, but I had a 5th kid. I had 8 seniors this year. 4 of them are going D1. And the 5th kid that was a borderline D1, D2 type of kid. But because of just not getting a chance to finish her junior year and then just having COVID affect her senior year as far as recruiting and everything being virtual, she's going to a D3 school, and could she have been D1, D2 possibly, but and then just the way the state of Michigan is set up, if you're not, there's only like 1 D2 school that even takes Black kids for real. So once you miss the D1 bandwagon, you drop all the way to D3 NAIA. So she's a kid that's directly affected by a lot of coaches that I contacted being like, hey, we got 3 kids coming back. We got 3 seniors coming back. We're looking at the transfer portal for the last 2 spots. And that's a constant thing across the board for a lot of mid-major schools. Everybody's trying to steal a player, and they're waiting to the last moment. Even now, they're still waiting because right now I thought it was going to end after the NCAA tournament ended, but since colleges are still hiring and firing coaches, it's still creating a backlog in recruiting transfer kids because people are waiting to see where coaches go before they make their decision. So until a majority of those college players find homes, there's a bunch of seniors that are waiting and they're getting anxious, so they're taking D3 jobs, JUCO jobs, NAIA jobs instead of waiting to see what's going to be available in June. Who wants to wait till June their senior year? That's who does that, right?
Yeah, that sounds like it would be awfully late in the game to do something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, and just to clarify, I think that Porter and I, the way we were kind of talking about it was a little bit like, again, this is all hypothetical, and certainly know that there would have to be things to iron out. But I think that kind of where we were going in our conversation was a little bit almost kind of like, when somebody declares for like an NBA, but they're not hiring an agent or something. Basically, you get that kind of feedback. And I think that it probably, we could do a whole pod on this and do several hours worth of whether it would be worth it to, how you would regulate agents if you did NCAA or something. But in theory, did you see that in the chat, by the way, Tony? Or Kirby too?
Yes. They're the ones that won the league this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Continue.
So yeah, just to finish the thought, it was something along the lines of you'd have to probably, maybe pre-clear agents or something, or try almost as a test case, because yeah, you're not going to have a lot of people, and you probably just can't have every agent, and you'd have to sort through how that would actually operate. But if you had some high level agents, and basically if you were somebody that was like a grad transfer and you're not getting much interest from an agent, if it was a select few or whatever, essentially to say, yeah, I'm probably not going to be, or I've got something else left to prove in my next senior year. And I don't mean to sound facetious about that, but essentially saying that I've got something else to work on if I'm going to get their attention. So that was it.
I think it would be good to maybe through an agent or even just some more guidance. Like I know me coming out of my senior year, it was like, there's a lot that you have to learn in that short time from when you go like, oh, I'm going here to either WNBA or free agent or whatever, and then like to overseas, just a lot where you're picking your agent, you're figuring out your steps, like you don't know, like there's really no clue to know how overseas works. Besides, the only way I gathered the most information was like talking to people who already played overseas. So there's just so much unknown, even in how to pick an agent, or your coaches help you what they can. Some are more experienced than others with it, depending like how much they've experienced it with their players. So I think just a little more guidance in general to people coming out, and like whether that's through an agent or something, would be nice for seniors or 5th years, whatever, coming out, or just pondering what they should do, take another year or not. Just, I recall a very lack of just knowledge of how it all works and guidance with what to do and how to pick an agent. And like now it's like, yeah, we know, and I've switched agents, and like
That's
Yeah.
a great innovation because it's almost like we need a rookie symposium that they have for the rookies that get acclimated to the NBA. I heard about that, where they get a full crash course on things that help them get acclimated a little faster or better. You need that for overseas because every country different. Shane talked about Spain. Spain different from France, different from Italy, different from Greece, different from Turkey. There's no way that you can pinpoint anything overseas unless you go there. So it's almost like we created something that could be almost like the guys and girls that are serious. There is like the people that care about putting them in the right position to be that. And it's almost like we create our own rookie symposium to go in and say, this is what you need to be aware of, good, bad, and indifferent of playing overseas basketball. I think it's very valuable.
And that's one of the things that I see. I'm not an agent. I have a legal background and everything like that. And and I know some agents are, have legal training, and probably maybe a lot to most don't. But one of the things I see is like a parallel between people that have never hired a lawyer before and people that have never had an agent before. And like you can run across some that will tell you something because they want your business, and then it's kind of like that probably in a lot of different fields. But I think that sometimes telling the prospective client what the realistic outcomes are, at least in terms of my personal approach, it just doesn't seem like that can necessarily, like, that's probably what you would expect to hope to have from an agent, is tell you somebody that's going to tell you, look, you're probably going to be playing third tier Spain or whatever if you come out now. And so I think that that's probably the way I look at it. And so saying that if you had somebody that was going to give you candid advice and feedback, but yeah, you're going to be opening it up to people. They're probably like, oh yeah, you signed with me, I'll get you here. And then maybe you're forgotten about. So that was kind of where I was coming from with in terms of what the discussion with Porter and I was this afternoon. So it's definitely has a lot of things that need to be worked out. So that was that. But one of the things I think was also interesting in terms of Torey was bringing it up. We've talked about what leagues and what countries that there are. You could be in a good country or in a good country but a bad league, or a bad country in a good league, or vice versa.
In a bad country, or
yeah, exactly. And so I mean, even if you enjoy the fact that you'd be making money and everything like that, there's also probably some countries that you probably would rather not go to. So that's also a thing, is just because some of these leagues might be good or not, but you've also got to have it meshed up where not only am I comfortable in this new country, it's a good country to go see, and I'm in a good league. So you've got to have all those things aligned.
Yeah. Not only that, then it comes down to like the specific club, the management, because that can totally change everything. Your experience in that country could be deterred by how that specific club you're on is ran, how that management is ran.
You could literally have a manager with, they can have all the money, but the owner is just crazy. He just decides he doesn't want to pay you. Doesn't want to pay. So man, Europe is hilarious.
Exactly, it's a whole show.
Well, why don't we wrap up this discussion? Have some final thoughts, Kirby. If you had to give yourself advice, putting yourself in the shoes of you being here today, like you're saying you're getting ready to finish up college, what is the thing that you would really say is the most important heading into, and with hindsight being 2020, what is the most important thing you would say to someone in the very situation, in the nature that we have now with COVID and there's all this other stuff to look into if you're looking to go overseas as a pro?
If someone really wanted to play overseas, like I still overall enjoyed it and would, vouch for it. There's just you got to give it time. You got to let yourself adjust. I think that's the biggest thing. So many people get over there and freak out, or it's so hard at first that I've seen a lot of people, quit in their first season or first year or two, and with some more time, things probably could have worked out. And now I think there needs to be even more of an adjustment time because things have been so messed up. So just any advice is just to give yourself time to adjust and just, and try to get as much, experience. If you have a limbo time, to keep that experience up any way possible. But yeah, I think overall that would be it. Cause that was tough for me in the beginning too. I pushed through it, but in the very beginning, I was questioning, like, is this it? I don't know if I can do this, that type of stuff.
I'm pressing too many buttons at once. I'm switching between the cameras here with the gallery view and whatnot. Torey, what are your thoughts?
And you're muted.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so I would say I'm definitely for it because it's given, if I look at myself, it gave me an opportunity to do something I love and come back to my community. And people are now saying, kids in my area, like, oh, I would like to go overseas. Before, everybody wanted to go to the NBA. So it has an impact and it's been inspiring. But I would say, like, listen, there are rules to this. There's stuff that you need to follow, different regimens, because overseas could pretty much break you. So when I see some of these great players that guys be like, oh, they just came back, played a half a year, 1 year, I understand why they didn't play anymore, because it's like, yo, this is not what everybody thinks. You might have better, you do have better facilities in college. So guys come in that, get pampered. Yeah, they get pampered, and then it's like, wow. So I would just tell them, have a real open mind. And besides basketball, learn about the different cultures and get a real understanding of what's happening. If I go to Greece, deal with the Greek. Go to Italy, deal with the Italians, because you want a worldly experience. So I feel like I'm a well-rounded person based on my experiences in Europe and all the cultures. So I didn't just go to practice back home. I wanted to be immersed in the culture. So I would tell people to be immersed in the culture, and that's what I would say to myself. Continue to be immersed in the culture and learn as much as you can learn. It's not just about basketball, because if it's confined to just basketball, you won't last over there.
I agree with that a lot.
Shane, I know that you agree with that as well, that it's not all about basketball. I know we've had you on every conversation we've had. It's more than just basketball. What would you say to yourself if you were heading over there right now?
They stole all my good points, but learn the language, especially if it's a Latin or if it's a Latin language, learn it. Even if it's not a Latin language, try to learn it anyways, because that could be the difference between you having a 6-figure position when you're 40 years old, because you're going to build connections with people. But if you learn that language, you might be able to you might be a global ambassador for somebody. Build relationships, because you don't know what you're going to do. You don't know what you're going to do later when you retire. Okay, let me finish something. So you don't know what you're going to do when you retire. For instance, as a coach, you can be a heck of a recruiting coordinator if you have if you build relationships with GMs in Europe. So for instance, let's say Kirby finally, whenever she shuts it down, she goes back to James Madison. James Madison, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she goes back, and now she's the RC at James Madison. And she tells her head coach, "Look, I can get you one kid every 2 years out of Western Europe, because I know 5 different GMs there, and every club in Europe has a farm system. So, if I can get you a kid whenever you need one, I can get you a shooter, I can get you a big from Nigeria or whatever, because you built those relationships. And also learn the culture. And one thing that I had to start doing, especially when you're single, before you start having kids, before you're married, walk everywhere. If it's the type of weather you can walk, or if it's the type of place where you can move around, because you'll learn so much just from walking around. Like you'll learn so much. Like I've been blessed, not just in the nicer places I played, like the places I played early on in my career. Like I lived in Guadalajara, then I lived in Logroño, which is the wine capital of Spain. You learn, so when you live somewhere, you explore, it teaches you a lot. So now, when I come back here, a lot of people are avid wine drinkers. So now that's a conversation starter. Playing in Astana and playing in a VTB in a Russian league, even though I hated living in Astana, but it opened me to Russian culture, and that's just another, you just bridge so many gaps when you're open to new ideas, cultures, languages, and people. Okay. You about to take a bath, you about to take a shower. And whatever you do, let your kids enjoy it too if you have kids, because my kids destroy every podcast.
I love it.
People say, "Hey Shane, we get a podcast." I say, "Are you sure you want me on a podcast?"
It's
mean,
part
what
of
does
the
it tell you?
entertainment.
What does
We're
it
a
tell
package
you
deal.
that we keep asking you back? What does that say about us? No, I was kidding.
You guys are crazy. That's what they say.
Well, it's been good talking with you all.
Yeah.
This has been an informative discussion, and I hope everybody who is going to end up listening to this is going to find it as informative as we all did. Kirby Burkholder, Shane Lawal, Torey Thomas. It's the three of them. Welcome, and thank you for so much for being on with us today. It's been fun, and we'll definitely have you all back at some point as well
Nice to
in
meet
some various capacities.
Nice to meet you guys.
And of course,
nice
watch
to meet
their-
y'all, man. God bless y'all and keep pushing.
Yep. And be sure to watch all three of their episodes individually. So that's the other plug.
Yeah.
Yep.
The plug is get us hits too, because that's what this is all about.
Hit the subscribe button. Yeah.
Mhm. Exactly.